Hi, everybody. It's Miss Rose, and we are going to learn some new stuff for week 16. This is our last week of new content for the semester. So, last week we learned about graphing parallel lines, and then we learned about a bunch of vocabulary that had to do with lines. And I promised that this week was where we were going to put it together. What did that vocabulary have to do with parallel lines? So, our list of vocabulary words looks really intimidating. But the good news is that we have learned all of these before. We know what it means for lines to be parallel. We taught you last week what it means for two lines to be cut by a transversal. And then we learned all those new special angle pairs. The focus for this week is going to be, are those special angle pairs congruent or supplementary, and when does that happen? So that is what we are about to explore. So this would be a good place to take some really good, careful notes because you'll be able to use this on all of your assignments and your assessments this week. So whether or not we're dealing with parallel lines, some things that we learned earlier in the year are that vertical angles are always congruent to each other. And supplementary angles, those are those two angles next to each other, those always add to 180 degrees. Those are two facts that have nothing to do with parallel lines. That's just things that we learned about some angles earlier in the year. So what about our new special angle pairs? Well, I'm going to show you a demo. And we'll see what you notice. So I have two lines here cut by a transversal. The two lines are not parallel. So I'm going to keep moving and moving the bottom line until it looks more and more parallel to the top one. Getting closer. And I just missed it. This is going to be impossible. Oh, I did it. Thought it was going to be impossible for me to get them to stop exactly. So here's what I want you to notice. So the angles were all totally different from each other until all of a sudden the lines became parallel. And then we get to notice there's a bunch of angles that end up being congruent to each other. So let me point out the corresponding angles. I said that I look at these the most out of all of them. So the corresponding angles, if you look at the blue and the blue, they're both 120. The green and the green, they're both 60. Purple and purple, both 120. So the corresponding ones ended up being congruent. If you end up looking at the alternate interior, check out blue and blue, 120 and 120. Or the alternate exterior, 120 and 120. Or 60 and 60. All right, now check out the same side interior one. So check out the blue. They are not congruent to each other, 120 and 60. Hopefully I didn't pick numbers that are deceiving to you. Let me switch that one closer to like 130 and make those lines parallel to each other. There we go. 130 and 50. I was nervous with 120 and 60 that you might see a different relationship. 130 and 50, hopefully you notice those angles add up to 180. So that's the relationship. So we can say same side interior angles are subs. Let's see if the same is true with same side exterior angles. Yep, 130 and 50, those add up to 180. So let's take down some notes on that. And then you have the link to this demo so you can play around with it as well. So when lines are parallel, the alternate interior and the alternate exterior angles end up being congruent to each other. The corresponding angles were congruent also. That makes sense to me. They correspond with each other, so of course they end up being congruent to each other. Then the same side interior ones and the same side exterior, be careful here. Those are not congruent. Those are subs, which means that they add to 180. Some good news here. First off, I think if you don't remember the relationships, if you draw a nice, pretty accurate diagram where your lines look parallel, I think you'll be able to figure out which ones are congruent and which ones are subs. The other good news is that's your only choices. When lines are parallel, any of those special angle pairs, they're either going to be congruent or subs. So when you do every problem, like for example, this one coming up, you want to ask yourself, the angle that I'm dealing with, is it congruent to or supplementary to the given one? So let's start here with angle 1 is 115. So you guys know how much I love the buy one, get one free kind of idea. So with parallel lines, we get a ton of stuff for free. So vertical angles we've always gotten for free. But the new part is corresponding angles we get for free also. So angle 1 corresponds with angle 9. 6 and 14 correspond. So look at all of that you get for free because the lines are parallel. If you were not given that the lines were parallel, you wouldn't be able to do that. And then what you had to do to figure out the other angles, like angle 2, you had to find the sup of 115. So go 180. This little window is going to drive me crazy. All right, let's see if I can do this without touching the screen. 180 minus 115 is 65. So all those other angle 2 and 5 are 65. 10 and 13 are 65. All right, that batch of angles is done. The thing that people make mistakes on sometimes is they think that then the other batch of angles also are going to be 115 and 65. But these lines here are not parallel to each other. So that means that that other batch of angles is not going to be related to what we just did. We have angle 12 is 110. So let me label that. Vertical angle for free. Corresponding angles for free. And then all I have to do is find the sup of 110. 180 minus 110 is 70. So all those other angles are 70. So you do a couple of little calculations, all the rest you get for free. You just have to be really careful about which lines are actually parallel and then which angles end up being congruent or supplementary to each other. So that was an example just with numerical values. What about some algebra? Angle 1 and angle 2. Those are alternate interior angles. All right, what do we know about alternate interior angles? Well, we only know this new relationship if the lines are parallel. And I don't know if we've talked about that this year, but do you see how these lines have like a little extra arrow on them? An arrow is how you label lines as being parallel to each other. So if there's an extra little arrow on the lines, and that means, yes, they are parallel. So what you want to ask yourself is alternate exterior angles, are they congruent or sups? If you can't remember, I would look at them. If one is acute and one is obtuse, then they're probably sups. These are both acute. They're congruent to each other. So 3x minus 17 equals x plus 1, and then I solve. Remember, x is like 1x, so 3x minus 1x is 2x. Then I'm going to go plus 17. 2x equals 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9. All right, what you could do to double check is you could always substitute the x back in to angle 1 and angle 2 and make sure that they really are congruent to each other. It's asking us to find angle 3. One warning I want to give you is this diagram is definitely not drawn to scale, so you're going to be surprised at what you get when you plug in 9 for x. You get 27 minus 17 is 10. A 10-degree angle would be really small. I know that that does not look anything like a 10-degree angle. That's okay. A diagram is just a model. Trust the numbers. If you totally think you made a mistake, then plug it in for angle 2 also. 9 plus 1 is 10. And then that will show you that you didn't make a mistake. So it didn't ask us for angle 1 or angle 2, though. It asked us for angle 3, which is next to angle 2, which means those angles are sups. So I want to go 180 minus 10, and I'm left with 170. I know that's a huge angle. Angle 3 doesn't look like 170. It's not drawn to scale. All right, let's do one more algebraic example kind of like that. So angle 3 and angle 4, same side interior. Are those lines parallel? Yes, there's that extra little arrow on them. So the lines are parallel. Same side interior, were those congruent or were they sups? If I forget, I can look at it. 4 is acute and 3 is obtuse. So they are not congruent to each other. They're sups. What that means is if you add them up, they add up to 180. So they're alternate interior angles, they're subs. I'm going to add up my like terms, 28K plus 12 equals 180. 180 minus 12 is 168. Divide by 28. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I could make a guess, but I'm going to use my calculator just to double check. And yes, K is 6. K is 6. All right, it asks for the measure of angle 1. Again, that was not one of the ones that was given. I like my vertical angles though. 1 and 4 are vertical angles, so it would be pretty quick and easy if I could just plug in for angle 4, then I'll automatically know what angle 1 is. So I'm going to go 8 times 6. Sorry that keeps happening. I know it's distracting. See if I can get back there. All right, 8 times 6 is 48, plus 1 is 49. So if angle 4 is 49, then angle 1 must be 49. So just to compare and contrast, the first example was a pair of angles that ended up being congruent, so we set the expressions equal to each other. The second example were a pair of angles that were subs, so we added them up to 180. So that's what you're going to be asking yourself for all of these problems. Do I equal them together or do I add them up to 180? When you're dealing with parallel lines, it's pretty much those two choices. All right, this last one is my favorite because do you see the little special extra arrows on those two lines? No. Oh, and I see it says determine whether A is parallel to B and the A and the B got left off. So let me put that on there. So it is not given that they're parallel to each other. It is asking you if they're parallel. So the mistake people make is they say, well, those are corresponding, so they must be congruent to each other. They're only congruent if the lines are parallel. So please do not make any assumptions about your parallel line or new relationships with parallel lines. You need to use something that you knew for a fact before, which is pretty much vertical angles or subs. All right, this is our last problem, so that only has to pop up this one last time. All right, those are subs, which mean that they add up to 180 again. So I'm going to add up those two angles. I'll just do this together all at once. 12x and 7x is 19x, and 17 and 11 is 28. So add them up because they're subs. Don't make any assumptions about lines being parallel. Those are just subs because the two angles next to each other that make a straight angle are always subs. All right, again, I don't know off the top of my head what 152 divided by 19 is, so I'm going to use my calculator. And I get x equals 8. All right, I found my x. The key to this problem is I have to plug it back in because I'm checking to see if those lines are parallel or not. So I'm going to plug it back in here. I'm going to go 12 times 8 plus 17. Let's see what I get. 12 times 8 is 96, plus 17 is 113. All right, 113 degree angle, 126 degree angle. No, those do not end up being congruent to each other. So the answer for this one is no. A is not parallel to B. You can use that symbol because the corresponding angles are not congruent. So when the lines are parallel, feel free to use those new relationships that we learned about today. If they're not parallel, then you have to use old stuff, and then you'll use the new relationships to check and see whether the lines are parallel or not. Okay, let me know what questions you have and what ideas you want to go over more. Hopefully you took some really good notes and you can use them to work on some practice problems. Bye.